The autumn leaves were falling outside my study window, painting the lawn in shades of amber and crimson. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in October 2025, the kind of day that makes you want to stay inside with a good book and a strong cup of coffee. I was halfway through a biography of John Adams, my reading glasses perched on my nose, when the front door creaked open. My son Ethan called out from the hallway, "Dad, you home?" His voice carried that familiar mix of confidence and hesitation, the same tone he'd used as a teenager when he needed to confess a broken window or a bad grade. I set the book down on the oak side table, its pages splayed open like an unanswered question. "In here, Ethan," I replied, adjusting my glasses. He stepped into the study, all 6 feet of him, dressed in a navy blazer that looked a size too small for his broad shoulders. At 34, Ethan had his mother's dark hair and my stubborn jawline. He carried himself with the easy charm of someone who'd made a name for himself in Boston's tech scene. But today, there was something else in his eyes. A nervous energy, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. "Dad," he said, pausing to run a hand through his hair. "I've got news." "Big news." I leaned back in my leather armchair, the one I'd bought after winning my first big case 30 years ago. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice steady. As a retired defense attorney, I'd learned to read people, clients, judges, juries. Ethan's fidgeting hands and the way he avoided my gaze told me this wasn't about a promotion or a new car. He took a deep breath, then blurted it out. "I'm getting married." The words hit me like a gavel striking wood. The biography slipped from my lap, landing with a soft thud on the hardwood floor. Married. My son, who still forgot to call me on my birthday some years, was getting married. I managed to smile, though it felt brittle. "To whom?" I asked, my voice calmer than my racing heart. "Her name's Sophie Bennett," he said, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a kid with a new baseball glove. "She's incredible, Dad. Smart, driven, beautiful. Works in finance downtown." "You're gonna love her." I nodded slowly, buying time to process. "Sophie Bennett," I repeated, testing the name. "How long have you two been together?" He shifted his weight, his polished loafers squeaking against the floor. 3 weeks, he said, almost defensively. "But it's real, Dad. I know it sounds fast, but when you meet her, you'll understand. 3 weeks. The words echoed in my head like a bad alibi. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to know someone's favorite coffee order, let alone commit to a lifetime together. I folded my hands, a habit from my courtroom days when I needed to project calm while my mind raced. 3 weeks, I said carefully. "Ethan, that's quick. You barely know her." He laughed, but it was sharp, edged with frustration. "You sound like you're cross-examining me, Dad. Not everything's a case to be dissected." I raised an eyebrow, stung but not surprised. Ethan had always been sensitive about my career as a defense attorney. 30 years of defending clients, some guilty, some innocent, had taught me to question everything. It wasn't just a job. It was who I was. Henry Caldwell, the man who could spot a lie from across a courtroom. But to Ethan, it sometimes felt like I was interrogating him instead of protecting him. "I'm not cross-examining you," I said, softening my tone. "I just want to make sure you're thinking this through. Marriage is a big step. You don't even know her middle name yet, do you?" He rolled his eyes, a gesture so familiar it almost made me smile. "It's Marie, if you must know. And yeah, it's fast, but it feels right. She makes me happy, Dad. Happier than I've been in years. Happy." The word hung between us, fragile and fleeting. I wanted to believe him, but 3 weeks? My mind flashed to the cases I'd seen. Marriages rushed into for all the wrong reasons. Money, desperation, or something to prove. I studied Ethan's face, searching for doubt. But all I saw was that stubborn determination he'd inherited from me. "Tell me about her," I said, picking up a pen from the desk and twirling it between my fingers. Another old habit, one that helped me focus. She's 32, works as a financial manager for a big firm downtown. Smart as hell, Dad. She's got this way of lighting up a room, you know. And her family's kind of a big deal in Boston. Old money, I guess you'd say. Old money. The phrase raised a red flag. Boston was full of families like that, wealthy, connected, and often hiding secrets behind their polished facades. I scribbled Sophie Bennett, financial manager, old money in the small notebook I kept on my desk. Ethan caught the motion and frowned. Really, Dad? You're taking notes already? Just trying to keep up, I said, offering a small smile. You're moving fast. I need to catch my breath. He sighed, running his hand through his hair again. Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came to share good news. Sophie wants to meet you, and I thought maybe we could have dinner somewhere nice. You, me, her. This weekend? Dinner. A chance to see this Sophie Bennett for myself. To size her up, not as a father-in-law, but as the man who'd spent 3 decades reading people for a living. Sounds good, I said. Where were you thinking? The Oak Room downtown. Saturday 7:00. Sophie loves it there. Says it's got the best wine list in Boston. The Oak Room. Expensive, exclusive. The kind of place where deals were made over $200 steaks. Either Sophie was trying to impress me, or she was used to a lifestyle Ethan couldn't match. I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. I'll make the reservation. Ethan's shoulders relaxed, and for a moment, he looked like the boy who used to run to me after Little League games, grinning ear to ear. Thanks, Dad. You'll like her, I promise. She's special. I'm sure she is, I said, my voice smooth but my mind already working. Special could mean a lot of things. In my experience, people who moved this fast were either wildly in love or running from something. I intended to find out which. He moved toward the door, pausing to glance at the family photos on the bookshelf. Ethan at 10, holding a fish he'd caught at Cape Cod. Ethan at 18, tossing his graduation cap in the air. Moments I'd cherished, moments that felt like they belonged to another lifetime. She's excited to meet you, he said. I've told her all about you. That stopped me cold. What exactly have you told her? He shrugged, a little too casually. Just that you're my dad. Retired now, living the quiet life out here in the suburbs. I didn't get into, your old job. Smart boy. Ethan knew as well as I did that mentioning my career as a defense attorney changed how people saw me. Some got nervous, others got defensive, but nobody stayed neutral. Good call, I said. Let's keep it simple for now. He nodded, then hesitated at the door. Dad, just give her a chance, okay? I know you're gonna want to dig into everything, but try to just be my dad for this one. I'll try, I said, and we both knew it was only half a promise. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with the soft ticking of the grandfather clock and the weight of his words. Give her a chance. But in my world, chances were earned, not given, and I had 2 days to prepare for the most important meeting of my life. Saturday morning found me in my study, a cold cup of coffee on the desk, and my notebook open to a fresh page. The photos on the wall stared down at me. Ethan at 6, gap-toothed and proud with his first soccer trophy. Ethan at 16, sulking in a tux before prom. Ethan at 25, shaking my hand at his MBA graduation. Nowhere in those pictures was a Sophie Bennett. I'd spent a restless night turning over our conversation, replaying Ethan's words like they were evidence in a case. 3 weeks. The timeline gnawed at me. In 30 years as a defense attorney, I'd learned to trust my instincts about people who move too fast. Con artists, clients with something to hide, lovers with ulterior motives, they all shared that same reckless urgency. My notebook held 3 lines of information. Sophie Bennett, 32, financial manager. Old money family. Engaged to Ethan after 3 weeks. It was pitifully little to go on for someone who was about to become my daughter-in-law. I tapped my pen against the page, the rhythm steadying my thoughts. The phone rang at 10:15, jarring me from my notes. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and my heart lifted for a moment, hoping he'd called to share more details. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice softer than it had been yesterday. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry if I came off defensive. I know this is sudden." "No need to apologize," I said, leaning back in my chair. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked, a reminder of the normalcy I used to take for granted. "You're excited. I get it. Yeah, but I know how it looks to you, like I'm rushing into something crazy." He paused, and I could hear the hum of traffic in the background. He was probably downtown near his office. "Sophie's the real deal, Dad. I've never felt like this before." The conviction in his voice was real, and that made it worse somehow. Love could blind even the smartest people. "Tell me about her," I said, picking up my pen again. "What's she like?" "She's brilliant," he said, warming to the topic. "She manages investments for some big clients, hedge funds, that kind of thing. She's got this energy, you know, always moving, always planning. Her parents live in Back Bay, old Boston family. Her dad's a retired banker, and her mom does charity work. They're traditional, I guess. Traditional. Another red flag. Traditional families with old money often came with expectations and secrets. I wrote Back Bay, retired banker, charity mom in my notebook. "What made you say yes so fast?" I asked, keeping my tone light. A longer pause this time. "Have you ever met someone who just fits? Like they're the piece you didn't know you were missing?" I had. His mother, 35 years ago. That marriage had given me Ethan and 20 years of memories before it crumbled under the weight of my long hours and her restlessness. I didn't say that, though. "I have," I said instead. "But you know, Ethan, sometimes those pieces don't fit as well as you think at first." I know, he said quickly. "But this is different. Sophie and I we work. You'll see when you meet her." "I'm looking forward to it," I lied smoothly. "Saturday, 7 out at the Oak Room, right?" "Yeah, and Dad, don't Google her, okay? Just let her introduce herself. You'll get a better sense of who she is that way." The request caught me off guard. "Why would you think I'd—" "Because I know you," he interrupted, half laughing. "You've probably already got a notebook with her name in it." I glanced down at the open page on my desk, a familiar stab of pride mixing with guilt. My son knew me too well. "I'll see you Saturday," I said, dodging the accusation. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at the notebook. Sophie Bennett. The name felt heavy, like a file I hadn't cracked open yet. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd heard it before, maybe in passing, maybe tied to one of the cases I'd worked on years ago. Boston was a small world for people like me, people who'd spent decades in courtrooms. But it was probably nothing. Bennett was a common name, and I'd dealt with thousands of them in my career. Still, I made the reservation at the Oak Room, requesting a quiet table near the window. Old habits from my attorney days. Always control the environment when you can. I closed the notebook and headed downstairs to make lunch, though my appetite was gone. 2 days until I met the woman who wanted to marry my son. 2 days to prepare the right questions. If you're listening to this story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment with what time it is where you are. It's the little things that connect us, you know? And trust me, this story's about to get a lot more complicated. The Oak Room was everything I'd expected from a place that charged $200 for a steak. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over mahogany tables, and the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive wine. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Old habits from my courtroom days. Always know who's coming and going. I smoothed my tie, a navy one with subtle silver threads, and waited. Saturday evening in Boston had a certain energy, a hum of ambition and old money that pulsed through places like this. The other diners were a mix of corporate types in tailored suits and older couples celebrating anniversaries, their laughter soft against the clink of glassware. I sipped my water, the ice cubes shifting in the glass, and checked my watch. 7:05. Ethan and Sophie were late. At 7:12, they appeared in the doorway. Ethan looked sharp in a charcoal suit, his hair neatly combed, but it was Sophie who commanded the room. She was tall, with sleek blonde hair pulled into a low bun, her black dress hugging her frame like it was custom-made. A diamond watch glinted on her wrist, catching the light as she moved. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew every eye was on her, and Ethan trailed slightly behind. His arm linked through hers. "Sorry we're late," Ethan said as they approached, his smile apologetic. "Traffic was brutal." "No trouble at all," I said, standing to shake Sophie's hand. "Henry Caldwell." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sophie." Her handshake was firm, almost challenging, and her smile was polished to perfection. "Mr. Caldwell, Ethan's told me so much about you. All good, I hope." Her voice had a practiced charm, the kind I'd heard from clients trying to sell a shaky story. "All good," I replied, matching her smile, "though I'm sure he's told you I'm just a retired old man enjoying my quiet life." She laughed, a sound that was more performance than warmth. "Something like that. Retirement must be nice, though. All that time to, read books? Tend to your garden?" The jab was subtle, but it landed. Ethan shot her a quick look, but she was already settling into her chair, her posture perfect, like a queen at her court. He pulled out her chair with a tenderness that made my chest ache. My son was in deep. We ordered drinks, a scotch for me, a martini for Sophie, and a beer for Ethan. As we studied the menus, I took the chance to observe her. The diamond watch, the designer bag resting by her chair, the way she scanned the room like she owned it. Everything about her screamed wealth, but there was something else, too. A sharpness in her eyes, like she was always calculating her next move. "So, Sophie," I said, folding my menu, "Ethan tells me you're in finance. What exactly do you do?" She waved a hand, her watch catching the light again. "Oh, managing investments, client portfolios, that sort of thing." "It's all numbers and meetings. Not nearly as exciting as Ethan's tech projects. Vague. Deliberately so. In my experience, people who couldn't describe their jobs clearly were either hiding something or didn't have one." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sounds demanding. Which firm are you with?" Her smile tightened, just for a second. "A boutique firm downtown. You wouldn't know it. Very niche." Ethan jumped in, eager to keep the peace. "Sophie's brilliant at what she does, Dad. She's got clients lined up around the block." "I don't doubt it," I said, sipping my scotch. The burn was smooth, grounding. "And you, Ethan? How's the startup going?" He brightened, launching into a story about a new app his team was developing. Sophie listened with a faint smile, but her eyes kept drifting to me, like she was sizing me up. I felt it. That old courtroom instinct, the sense that I was being studied as much as I was studying her. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, oysters for Sophie, a salad for me and nothing for Ethan, who'd passed on starters to save room for his steak. Sophie speared an oyster with delicate precision, then looked at me. "So, Mr. Caldwell, what did you do before you retired?" "Ethan said you were in, consulting?" The question was a test, and we both knew it. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but I met her gaze. "I was a defense attorney," I said simply. 30 years in Boston's courtrooms." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and for a moment, something flickered in her expression. Surprise? Nervousness? It was gone before I could pin it down. "A lawyer," she said, her tone light but guarded. "That must have been intense. All those long hours fighting for who exactly?" "People who needed a voice," I said, keeping my answer short. "Some guilty, some innocent. My job was to make sure the truth came out." She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Truth, that's a tricky thing, isn't it? Everyone's got their own version." The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Ethan's startup, Sophie's favorite restaurants, but her demeanor had changed. She was careful now, choosing her words like a witness on the stand. Ethan, oblivious, glowed as he talked about their plans, the small wedding they were planning for November, just 6 weeks away. Then it happened. As the waiter set down our main courses, a $200 ribeye for Sophie, a grilled salmon for me, and a porterhouse for Ethan, she leaned back in her chair, her martini glass dangling between her fingers. "You know, Ethan," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "it's funny meeting your dad like this. I mean, here's you, building something real in the world, and then there's—" She gestured vaguely at me, her smile sharp. "A nobody, just filling time until the end." The words hit like a slap. Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. The couple at the next table glanced over, their conversation pausing. I set down my knife, cutting my salmon with the same precision I'd used to dissect arguments in court. "A nobody," I repeated, my voice calm but cold. "That's an interesting way to put it. Sophie," Ethan said, his voice tight. "That's not— Oh, come on," she interrupted, waving her hand. "I'm just being honest. Retirement's great and all, but it's not like you're out there changing the world anymore, Mr. Caldwell. You've got— What, books? A lawn to mow? That's your life now, right?" The restaurant seemed to grow quieter, the clink of glassware fading as other diners sensed the tension. Ethan's face flushed red, but Sophie was undeterred, her smile growing sharper. "I mean, it's inspiring in a way. Accepting your place, you know. Letting the next generation take over." I gripped my napkin under the table, my jaw tightening. 30 years of facing down prosecutors, judges, and guilty clients, and I'd never been called a nobody to my face. But I'd learned long ago not to react to provocation. Not yet. "Retirement does give you time to reflect," I said, my voice steady. "Plenty of space to think about what really matters." "Exactly," she said, leaning forward, her eyes gleaming. "Like family. Like Ethan's future. That's what matters now, not whatever you used to do." Ethan's hand clenched around his beer glass. "Sophie, enough. Dad's done more in his career than—" "It's fine, Ethan," I cut in, giving him a small nod. Everything's fine, but it wasn't. In 20 minutes, Sophie Bennett had shown herself to be calculating, dismissive, and comfortable, insulting her future father-in-law in public. And that watch on her wrist, the way she deflected questions about her job, it all added up to something I couldn't quite name yet. The rest of the meal passed in strained silence. Sophie made a show of savoring her ribeye, commenting loudly on its perfect marbling while glancing at my salmon with a smirk. "Lighter fare, huh? Probably better for your age," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I continued cutting my fish, each slice deliberate, my hand steady despite the anger simmering inside. Ethan tried to steer the conversation to neutral ground, movies, the Red Sox, but Sophie's barbs kept coming, each one sharper than the last. "Must be nice," she said at one point, swirling her martini. "Living in the past like that. All those stories about how things used to be." "Dad," Ethan said finally, his voice shaking with embarrassment. Maybe we should step outside," I said, setting down my fork with careful precision. My tone was calm, but it carried the weight of every courtroom I'd ever walked into. "Just for a moment, Ethan." Sophie's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, don't let me interrupt your father-son bonding." "I'll just finish my steak." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. We stood, leaving Sophie at the table with her expensive meal and the curious stares of nearby diners. The walk through the oak room felt like a march to the gallows, past tables of professionals pretending not to notice, past waiters who stepped aside with knowing looks. The cool October air hit us like a slap when we reached the parking lot. The city's hum a distant backdrop to the tension between us. We stopped near my car, a sensible sedan parked between a Porsche and a Range Rover. The street lights cast long shadows, and a light drizzle had started, misting the asphalt. "What was that?" Ethan said, his voice low but shaking with anger. What the hell just happened in there? That, I said, keeping my tone even, was your fiancée showing who she really is. Who she really is. He wheeled to face me, his hands clenched into fists. You mean she was nervous about meeting you? You mean she had a little too much to drink and said some dumb things? Come on, Dad. You were sitting there like a judge, analyzing every word she said. The accusation stung, because it wasn't entirely wrong. 30 years of reading people, spotting lies, uncovering motives, didn't just switch off because I'd hung up my briefcase. Ethan, I said, that woman spent the entire dinner insulting me, calling me a nobody, a relic. That's not nerves. That's disrespect. She was trying to be funny, he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. You don't know her like I do. She's under a lot of pressure at work, okay? And meeting you, it's a big deal. You're intimidating, Dad. Intimidating? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I'm your father, not a prosecutor on her case. But Ethan, she's lying about something. Her job, her intentions, I don't know what, but I can feel it. Lying? His voice rose, echoing off the parked cars. You're doing it again, Dad. Turning everything into one of your cases. Not everyone's a defendant. Sophie's not on trial. Maybe she should be, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. His face hardened, and for a moment, I saw his mother in him, that same stubborn pride that had ended our marriage. You know what? He said, stepping closer. I came here hoping you'd be happy for me, hoping you'd see how much Sophie means to me. But all you can do is judge her, judge me, like we're not good enough for your standards. That's not what this is about, I said, my voice rising despite myself. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me from what? He shouted. From being happy? From making my own choices? I'm 34 years old, Dad. I don't need you to save me anymore. The drizzle had turned into a steady rain, soaking through my jacket. Ethan's words hung between us, sharp and final. I wanted to argue, to list every red flag I'd seen in Sophie's behavior, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Pain, anger, and something worse. Disappointment. Ethan, I said softly, reaching for his shoulder. He stepped back, shaking his head. I'm done with this. I'm done with you treating my life like a case file. He turned toward his car, parked a few spaces away. Sophie's waiting. I'll see you around, Dad. The car door slammed, and I stood there, rain dripping down my face, watching his taillights disappear into the Boston night. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, but I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Inside the Oak Room, Sophie was probably finishing her steak, spinning a story about how Ethan's overbearing father had ruined their evening. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I'd gotten it all wrong. The rain didn't stop that night. It followed me home, drumming on the roof of my sedan as I drove through Boston's slick streets. My jacket was still damp when I stepped into the house, the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking softly, marking the hours I'd lost with Ethan. It was 10 p.m., but it felt like midnight. The fight in the parking lot replayed in my head, each word sharper than the last. I'm done with you treating my life like a case file. I sank into my armchair, the biography of John Adams still lying on the floor where I dropped it 2 days ago. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts until they're deafening. Ethan's face, angry, disappointed, haunted me. I'd spent 30 years as a defense attorney, fighting for clients who'd made terrible choices, but I'd never felt this helpless. Not in a courtroom, not in my life. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Ethan's name. I wanted to call, to apologize, to say something that would bring him back. But what could I say? That I was sorry for doubting his fiancée? That I was wrong to see red flags in her sharp smiles and vague answers? I set the phone down, untouched. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30, 2 hours earlier than usual. Sleep had been a lost cause, my dreams tangled with memories of Ethan as a boy, running to me with a scraped knee, laughing as we cast fishing lines at Cape Cod, rolling his eyes when I tried to teach him how to tie a tie. Those moments felt like relics now, artifacts from a time when I was his hero, not his adversary. I made coffee, the machine gurgling to life as the sun crept over the horizon. My reflection in the kitchen window looked tired, the lines on my face deeper than I remembered. The man staring back at me was 67 years old, a retired attorney with a reputation for never backing down, yet here I was, defeated by a single dinner. By 8 out, I was pacing the house, phone in hand, willing it to ring. I dialed Ethan's number, let it ring 4 times, then hung up before voicemail kicked in. What was the point? He'd made it clear he didn't want to hear from me. But I tried again at 9:15, this time leaving a message. Ethan, it's Dad. I'm sorry about last night. I worry about you. Call me back, okay? The words sounded hollow, like a closing argument I didn't believe in myself. I stared at the phone, waiting for a response that didn't come. By noon, I'd called 3 more times, each message more desperate than the last. Ethan, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. I handled it wrong. Just talk to me. Nothing. The silence was worse than any verdict I'd ever faced. I tried to distract myself, making lunch, flipping through a book, turning on the news, but my eyes kept drifting to the phone. I checked the volume, the signal, as if some technical glitch was keeping Ethan from calling back. Deep down, I knew better. That afternoon, I drove to Ethan's favorite coffee shop in Cambridge, a place he'd mentioned meeting Sophie at. I told myself I just needed air, a change of scenery, but the truth was uglier. I was watching for him, hoping to catch a glimpse of my son to see if he was okay. I parked across the street, sipping a cold latte and scanning the crowd. No Ethan, no Sophie. Just strangers living their normal Saturday lives. The days blurred into weeks. By the second week, I'd fallen into a routine of checking Ethan's routines. I'd drive by his office in the Seaport district, noting the times he arrived and left. I'd linger near Sophie's apartment building in Back Bay, a sleek glass tower that screamed wealth. I never approached him, never rang the buzzer. I just watched, like some kind of private investigator stalking his own son. It was pathetic, and I knew it. 30 years of defending clients, of fighting for justice, and here I was, reduced to spying on my own flesh and blood. But every time I thought about stopping, I'd remember Sophie's voice in that restaurant, sharp and dismissive. A nobody. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was wrong for him, that she was hiding something behind her diamond watch and practiced smile. One Tuesday morning, I parked across from Sophie's building, the engine idling to keep the October chill at bay. At 7:45, Ethan emerged, his navy coat buttoned against the wind, a coffee cup in one hand and his briefcase in the other. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped in a way I hadn't seen before. My heart twisted. Was he happy? Was Sophie really the missing piece he'd claimed she was? I scribbled the time in my notebook, 7:45 a.m., Ethan leaves for work. The page was filled with similar notes, a sad catalog of my son's life. I was about to drive away when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop watching us or I'll call the police. Sophie. It had to be. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, a mix of shame and defiance burning in my chest. I typed a reply, I'm just worried about him, but deleted it. Instead, I drove home, the text searing itself into my memory. The 3rd week was the hardest. I stopped leaving voicemails, the sound of Ethan's recorded voice too painful to bear. You've reached Ethan Caldwell. Leave a message. I'd heard it so many times it felt like a taunt. Instead, I sent texts I couldn't bring myself to finish. Ethan, I'm sorry about everything. Delete. I just want to know you're okay. Delete. I love you. Son. Delete. One evening, I found myself at the park where I'd taught Ethan to ride a bike. The same place we'd celebrated his college acceptance over ice cream. The swings were empty now, the air sharp with the promise of winter. I sat on a bench, my breath visible in the cold, and let the memories wash over me. Ethan at 7, wobbling on his bike, laughing when he finally got the hang of it. Ethan at 18, hugging me after getting into MIT. When had I become the enemy in his story? A police officer approached me one Thursday evening, his patrol car parked nearby. "Evening, sir," he said, his tone polite but firm. "We got a call about a suspicious vehicle in the area." I showed him my license, explained I was just waiting for someone who wasn't coming. He was about my age, with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too many family disputes. "Might want to give it some space," he said, not unkindly. Sometimes that's the only thing that works. Space. The word felt like a sentence. I had decades of space ahead of me, retirement stretching out like an empty road. But I also had patience, the kind forged in courtrooms, waiting for the right moment to make a case. Ethan's wedding was 3 days away, October 19th, circled in red on my kitchen calendar. No invitation had arrived. I was in my study the next morning, staring at a crossword puzzle I couldn't focus on. Reconciliation after conflict, 9 letters. The answer eluded me, my mind stuck on Ethan. The phone rang at 10:30, his name flashing on the screen. My heart skipped, a jolt I hadn't felt since my last big case. I answered before the second ring. "Dad." Ethan's voice was small, hesitant, like he was testing the waters. "It's me." "Ethan," I said, setting down my glasses. "I'm so glad you called." "The wedding's Saturday," he said, the words rushing out. 3 days from now. "I know it's last minute, but Sophie's parents want to meet you. They're insisting on a family dinner tomorrow night, before the ceremony." My chest tightened, a mix of relief and dread. "Of course," I said. "I'd be honored to meet them." "Really?" He sounded surprised, like he'd expected me to argue. "Because they're traditional, you know? Especially Sophie's mom. She's got strong ideas about family." "I understand," I said, reaching for my notebook. "When and where?" "Tomorrow, 7, at Sophie's place in Back Bay. Our place, I mean." He paused, and I heard office noise in the background, phones ringing, muffled voices. He was calling from work, probably on his lunch break. "Dad, I need to ask you something." "Anything," I said, my pen poised over the page. "Can you just be my dad tomorrow? Not the lawyer, not the guy who sees lies everywhere. Just my dad." The request stung, but I got it. He wanted the father who'd taught him to fish, not the one who'd spent decades unraveling people's secrets. "I'll be on my best behavior," I promised. "Thanks," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "And Dad?" "I'm sorry about what I said in the parking lot. I was mad. I didn't mean it." "You don't need to apologize," I said, my throat tight. I messed up too. I should have listened more. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past month settling between us. I could picture him at his desk, probably rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was nervous. "So, tomorrow night," I said, steering us back to safer ground. "Should I bring anything?" "Maybe flowers for Sophie's mom, Margaret. She loves orchids." "And Dad?" His voice softened. "Thanks for doing this. It means a lot." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," I said, and I meant it. After we hung up, I stared at the crossword puzzle. Reconciliation after conflict, 9 letters. The answer hit me like a revelation. Peacemaking. I filled in the letters, each one deliberate, then opened my notebook. Tomorrow's dinner was my chance to rebuild what I'd broken, but it would take preparation, strategy, the kind I'd used for my biggest cases. This time, though, the stakes weren't about winning or losing. They were about my son and my place in his life. The October evening was crisp, the kind of night where Boston's skyline glittered like a promise. I parked my sedan carefully between a sleek Tesla and a polished BMW, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. My charcoal suit, the one Ethan had liked at his MBA graduation, felt like armor. In my hands were a bouquet of white orchids for Sophie's mother and a bottle of mid-range Cabernet, chosen with care to show respect without seeming like a bribe. This was it. My last chance to mend things with my son, to prove I could be the father he needed. Not just the lawyer I'd always been. Sophie's penthouse in Back Bay was a monument to wealth, all glass and steel rising above the tree-lined streets. I adjusted my tie, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the cool air. The orchids glowed under the streetlights, their petals delicate but strong, like the hope I was clinging to. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open and there was Sophie. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her emerald green dress catching the light. Her smile was sharp, practiced, like a prosecutor sizing up a witness. "Well, look who's here," she said, her tone dripping with mock surprise. "Our distinguished retiree." "Good evening, Sophie," I said, keeping my voice steady. I extended the orchids. "These are for your mother." She took the bouquet, turning it with theatrical interest, like she was inspecting evidence. "How sweet, very traditional. Mom's into more exotic flowers these days, but she'll appreciate the effort." The backhanded compliment wasn't lost on me. Everything about Sophie was a performance, designed to keep her one step ahead. I offered the wine next. "And this is for your father." "Cabernet?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "Dad's more of a Scotch man, but I'm sure he'll make do." She stepped aside, gesturing me in. "Come on, welcome to our home, our home." The words hung in the air, possessive and pointed. The penthouse was as I'd imagined, coldly opulent, with minimalist furniture that cost more than my car and abstract art that looked like stock market charts. A flat-screen TV dominated one wall, its sleek design screaming money. This wasn't a home. It was a showcase for success. "Impressive," I said, because some response was expected, isn't it? Sophie's chest puffed with pride. "Everything's custom." That sound system alone could buy a small house. But when you're in high-level finance, you learn to appreciate the finer things. Ethan emerged from the kitchen, looking older than his 34 years, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Dad," he said, his voice warm but strained. He crossed the room to hug me, and for a moment, it felt like we were back at Cape Cod, just the two of us against the world. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, squeezing his shoulder. Sophie was already at the bar, pouring drinks with the ease of someone used to hosting. Scotch, wine, or maybe something lighter for the older generation. The jab was subtle but sharp, another reminder of her need to diminish me. "Scotch is fine," I said, keeping my tone even. She handed me a crystal tumbler, the liquor catching the light like amber. Ethan tried to lighten the mood, gesturing to the sectional sofa. "Sit, Dad. Sophie's been telling me about this place all week." "The view's incredible." "Of course," Sophie said, cutting in. "You've got to see the skyline from up here. It's a different world from—" "What, the suburbs? Must be nice out there, all that quiet." The dig was clear, painting my life as small, irrelevant. I sat, the leather cool against my hands, and studied Sophie. Her confidence was unshakable, but there was something else. Nervousness, maybe, flickering just beneath the surface. "So," Sophie said, settling into a chair like a queen on her throne. "Tomorrow's the big day. Hard to believe Ethan's finally settling down. He's been so independent for so long." The word dripped with implication, as if independence was a flaw Ethan had overcome by choosing her. "Independence is a strength," I said quietly. I raised him to think for himself. "Oh, absolutely," she said, her smile tight. "But marriage is about teamwork, right? Letting the stronger partner take the lead." The mask was slipping, revealing a controlling edge beneath her polished exterior. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. "That'll be Mom and Dad," Sophie said, rising with a flourish. "Time to meet the family." I caught Ethan's eye as she strode to the door. He looked trapped, caught between love and doubt, his fingers drumming nervously on his glass. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded, but his grip on the glass said otherwise. Sophie's voice echoed from the hallway, bright and confident. "Mom, Dad, right on time!" "Come meet Ethan's father." Margaret and Edward Bennett stepped into the room, and the air shifted. Edward was tall, with the reserved posture of a retired banker, his grey hair neatly combed, his suit understated but expensive. Margaret, though, radiated warmth, her silver hair framing a face that seemed familiar in a way I couldn't place. Her smile was genuine, the kind that put people at ease, but her eyes held a sharpness I recognized from my courtroom days. "Mr. Caldwell," Margaret said, extending her hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you." "The pleasure's mine, Mrs. Bennett," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze steady, but there was something in her expression, a flicker of recognition, maybe, or surprise. Edward shook my hand next, his demeanor cool but polite. "Ethan speaks highly of you," he said, his voice clipped, like a man used to giving orders. "Mom, Dad," Sophie announced, gesturing to me with a dramatic sweep of her hand. "This is Henry Caldwell, Ethan's dad. You know, the guy enjoying his quiet retirement." The room froze. Ethan's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Edward's eyebrows lifted slightly, but Margaret's reaction was electric. Her face drained of color, her hand tightening on her purse as she stared at me. "Henry Caldwell," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophie didn't notice, her smile still sharp. "Yeah, you know, just a guy with too much time on his hands." Margaret's hand shot out, grabbing Sophie's arm with a force that made her daughter flinch. "Sophie," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Kitchen now." "What?" Sophie frowned, pulling her arm free. "Mom, what's now?" Margaret repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. They disappeared into the kitchen, the open layout of the penthouse making their hushed voices carry. Ethan and Edward exchanged confused glances, but I stayed still, my scotch untouched, listening. "Do you have any idea who that man is?" Margaret's voice was sharp, almost panicked. "He's Ethan's dad," Sophie said, her tone dismissive. "Some retired guy who reads books all day." "What's the big deal?" "That's Henry Caldwell," Margaret said, her words cutting through the air. "The defense attorney who saved your brother's life 20 years ago. He kept Michael out of prison when the whole world thought he was guilty." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's eyes widened, his gaze snapping to me. Edward leaned forward, his reserved demeanor cracking. In the kitchen, Sophie's voice faltered. "But he said he was retired." "Retired doesn't mean powerless," Margaret snapped. "Henry Caldwell took on the toughest cases in Boston and won. He's got connections in every courthouse from here to New York. You just called him a nobody?" "Sophie, you've made a terrible mistake." "But I didn't know," Sophie said, her voice small, almost childlike. "How was I supposed to know?" "You weren't," Margaret said, softer now. "But you need to fix this. Apologize. Now. Or you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The kitchen door swung open, and Sophie emerged, her face pale, her confidence shattered. Margaret followed, her expression a mix of worry and resolve. Sophie stopped in front of me, her hands twisting together. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice trembling. I had no idea who you were. I was completely out of line. I'm so sorry for what I said. The transformation was stark. The woman who'd spent weeks dismissing me as irrelevant now stood before me, humbled, her eyes wide with regret. I set my scotch down, deliberate and calm. "Apology accepted," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Let's move forward." Margaret stepped closer, her smile warm but tinged with emotion. "Mr. Caldwell, I don't know if you remember me. I was at the trial 20 years ago. My son Michael was facing 15 years for a fraud charge he didn't commit. You fought for him when no one else would. You gave us our family back. The memory clicked into place. Michael Bennett, a young accountant framed in a corporate scandal. I'd spent months unraveling the lies, proving his innocence. Margaret had been there every day, sitting in the gallery, her hands clasped in silent prayer. I remember, I said softly. I'm glad I could help. Ethan stared at me, his expression a mix of awe and guilt. Dad, he said, his voice breaking. You never told me. All these years I thought you were just a lawyer. I didn't know. I didn't see the need, I said, meeting his gaze. Work was work. You were my son. That's what mattered. Edward cleared his throat, his banker's reserve giving way to respect. Henry, I owe you an apology too. I had no idea we were in the presence of the man who saved my son. You're a legend in this city. The dinner that followed was a different world. Sophie, chastened, asked quiet questions about my career, her tone genuine for the first time. Margaret shared stories of Michael's life after the trial, how he'd built a family, a career, because of me. Edward spoke of his days in banking, his respect for my work clear in every word. Ethan listened, his eyes moving between me and Sophie, like he was seeing us both in a new light. During dessert, Sophie stood, her hands trembling as she raised her glass. I'd like to propose a toast, she said, her voice steady but humble. To Mr. Caldwell, who taught me tonight that you don't judge a person by what you think you know. Respect is earned through character, through sacrifice. And to family, new and old, for giving us the chance to learn. We drank, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Remorse in Sophie's eyes, real respect, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could grow into the partner Ethan deserved. Later, as we said our goodbyes, Ethan pulled me aside. Dad, he said, his voice soft. I'm sorry for everything, for not listening, for letting Sophie treat you like that. I didn't know who you were. You knew exactly who I was, I said, smiling. Your father. That's always been enough. He hugged me then, a real hug, the kind we hadn't shared since he was a boy. For the first time in weeks, I felt like my son was back. As I drove home through the Boston night, the city lights blurring past, I thought about justice. In the courtroom, it came through evidence and arguments, verdicts and sentences. But in life, it came through patience, through truth revealing itself in its own time. Tonight, justice had been a quiet dinner, a mother's memory and a son's apology. Tomorrow was Ethan's wedding, and for the first time since this all began, I was looking forward to it. You know, life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it. I spent 30 years fighting for truth in courtrooms, but the hardest truth I've learned is this. Sometimes, the people we love most need to make their own mistakes. And our job, as parents, as family, isn't to control them. It's to stand by them, to trust them, and to let them find their way back. Ethan found his way back to me, not because I demanded it, but because love and time have a way of cutting through the noise. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What's a moment when you had to let go to hold on to someone you love? Tell me about it. And if you want another story like this, check out the link on your screen. Thanks for listening.